Okay, we're going to be working on our three-dimensional paint palette and paintbrush. So our goal today is to get it drawn and to get it traced with our black permanent marker. Then we'll be adding the color to it. So this is what it should look like, hopefully, at the end of our class. So I'm going to move that to the side. You have your white paper. It doesn't matter which way you turn it, vertical or horizontal, as long as you are drawing it the way you want to. So you have a pencil. If you don't have an eraser on your pencil, get a big eraser and then your permanent marker. So the first thing we're going to be drawing is the paint palette. As you can see, it's kind of half of the paper, and it does have this indentation, this little divot right here. And if you've ever had a paint palette, this is where you put your thumb to hold it as you are painting. So make sure that you are watching the shape that I'm drawing because it's not a full circle. So again, make sure that you're drawing lightly because that way the pencil lines will be easier to erase. Now, my suggestion is wait to write your name once you've drawn it. That way, if you need to flip your paper over, you have the back side and it doesn't have your name on it, and you're not going to have to mess it up and, erase it. So the first shape is going to be that paint palette. Once you get that curve, again, it's a little bump in, back out. It's not much of a bump. Again, I'm drawing very light, so if I need to erase it, you won't have a dark line. Where that little divot is where that hole is. Now, we're going to make it three-dimensional because we're going to add these sides right here, which will paint like a light gray color, and inside that hole. So, inside the hole, on this side right here, I'm just going to draw another curved line. And then you can see the little lines that I'll draw with my marker. Again, we're only going to do it here, not the little divot, and then coming around here. So I start where my paint palette is, and I just kind of follow the edge. Again, not very far out, and then I kind of bring it in right where that divot is. And again, the same lines. Again, I'm drawing as light as possible because I don't. And then we're going to do the same thing on this side. So I'm going to start where my paint palette is, move out just a bit, bring it where that divot starts. Okay, so on the paint palette, this is kind of going over our primary and secondary colors and tertiary colors. So you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 larger blotches of paint. That's going to be our 3 primary and our 3 secondary. Then in between each bigger one, I have a smaller blotch, and that's going to be your tertiary. Now, these are called organic shapes. It's not a circle, it's not a square, it's not an oval, because technically when you squirt paint onto a paint palette, it's not going to be a perfect circle or some type of geometric shape, which are more shapes that you see in math: square, oval, circle, those kind of shapes. So as you're drawing the 6 larger ones, leave a little bit of space in between to add a smaller one. And again, this is up to you and how you want to draw it. But again, it's just a blob or organic shape. So you need 6 bigger ones. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you may notice you have more space between the others than some. So you can choose to erase and move one around. Once you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bigger ones, now you're going to go in between and add the smaller blotches. So again, you should have 2 large ones with a small one in between. So you should have 6 larger ones and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 smaller ones. Okay, so now that we have our paint palette drawn, we're going to move to our paintbrush. Now you can see the brush is laying down. We're going to be drawing where it looks like a blob of paint is on there. That's a color you get to pick. We'll add the bristles and then the metal part and then what looks like the wood grain. If you don't know, this is called a chip brush. Let me grab one. So chip brushes are very inexpensive brushes that we use. I mean, I use them in my own art study. Some of them usually have a hole right here. So that's exactly what we're drawing. I mean, it's not exact, but it's similar to what a chip brush is. So that's the type of brush we're brushing, not one that you would normally use in the art room, which may look like this, or our red brushes or our green brushes that you were also used to seeing. So this is just a little bit different type of artist brush. So we're gonna move that to the side. We'll just leave that here so you can see it. And then we're gonna draw that. We're gonna start with the handle, and then we'll move to the metal piece, and then the bristle, some of the bristles, because we'll add the glob on top. This shape is very interesting. Again, mine's a tad bit different compared to the one I drew in the example. So I always draw one side good and the other side not as good. Okay, so once I got my handle, I'm going to start with the metal piece. And you can see they've got two dots or two metal things, metal line. I'm not going to worry about the words. Another metal line with these little dashes. Okay, so again, I'm not drawing the exact detail, but it's a good one. Again, the hairs, bristles, we're only going to draw some of them. And then a blob of paint. So it's just kind of organic. Okay, so once we've drawn our chip brush, our paint palette, we are done with our pencil. Now, again, I didn't have to use the back, so before I move on, I'm going to flip it, write my name, so I know exactly whose paper this is. Please don't forget to write your name before you move on to the next part. That, again, that should be with your pencil. Do not write your name with your permanent marker because it will bleed through your paper, so do not forget to do that. Pencil and eraser, move to the side. We still need the big eraser because we have to erase all these lines once we move before we move to painting. So permanent marker, we're going to trace all the lines. Now, my thing is this permanent marker is not a fine tip marker, so my lines may be bigger than yours. If I'm giving you a fine tip marker, that's probably going to work better, which is just a skinny tip. I just don't have one in my tools because this has to be waterproof because we're painting on here. If you try to use a I don't know, just a regular pen or a Crayola marker, it's going to bleed and not work. So just do whatever permanent marker that you've been provided with. Now, on this one, I know my example was different. We didn't add the center of the brush and the wood grains, so that's up to you. If you want to jump in and try that on your own, please feel free to. The circle would be the same thing, and the wood grain, it's just a bunch of lines kind of focusing around each other. So once we've outlined it with our permanent marker, then we're going to move on to erasing all the lines underneath that. This is important you do now because if you try to paint then erase, it's not going to come off. Now, I know I didn't add the little lines that I added here, and mainly because I don't have a fine tip marker and it was just too many lines. So this example, I'm not going to have some of the details I have on the other one. So you can choose if you want to add certain details or not. Okay, so I've got all the lines erased. Permanent markers, please make sure the tops are on that. Put those away. Your pencil and eraser, put away. The next step when we return is going to be adding the color to our paint palette. Okay, today we're going to be adding the color. I have a set of watercolors. These are very old watercolors, so ignore how they look. You should have a cup of water. You should have your paintbrush, the palette, and then you have your paint mat with your art on top. So make sure that you have your correct paper. And this is exactly why we don't use our permanent marker to write our name, because as you can see, the permanent marker bled through. If you would have written your name with your permanent marker, you would have seen your name show up. So make sure that you have the right paper. Now, as we are being polite painters, please remember, your goal is to dip your brush in the paint, the water. Make sure that you're bouncing off. If you notice, as I bounce off the bottom, there is no noise. There is no water splashing. As I bring it out, just let it drip, and then you're going to wipe it off the side of your cup. Yes, you do need a wet brush. These are called watercolors. We need water to activate the paint. So we don't want to dry the brush off completely. I should not hear this. If you're doing that, you are tapping it on the water cup, which is going to splatter dirty paint water everywhere. So please make sure that you're not tapping, but you're wiping. So that's important as we are painting around each other. We have two colors we're not going to be using really as brown, black. We're going to use a version of black, which is just lightening up the black, but that's near the end. You have your red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. So these are the colors we're using to add the color to our big blotches of paint. So the first thing is we're going to do is paint those 6 blotches. Again, you have your primary, red, yellow, blue, your secondary, purple, green, and orange. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Remember, every time you switch colors, you need to wash your brush off, wipe it off the side before you switch colors in your paint palette. So when you want to wake up the paint, we always want to start with the lightest color, which is yellow. You lay your brush down and you just gently move it around. You can see, I already see it on my brush. Pick one to start. So once you find which one you want to paint yellow, I'm done with yellow, gently bounce it and wipe. Now you got to be careful. You can't just jump to a different color, whichever one you want. You have to do this in a specific order. So we have to work on adding these so when we mix the colors, they work out well. So the next color we're going to move to is orange. So it has to be to the left or right of your yellow. So figure out which way you're going to go. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to go here. This is where I'm adding orange. Okay, I've filled in that. Gently bounce and wipe because we have yellow, we have orange. The color that makes orange with yellow would be, hope you said red. So red, wake it up. Red is going to be here. So gently wipe. Now we know red is here. So the next color, the secondary color is going to be purple. Make sure you're doing purple, not blue. Okay, gently clean that off. The next color, the purple, the other color that makes purple with red, if you don't know, is blue. Be careful you're not putting your arm down in your paint. Clean that off. And the last color, when you mix yellow and blue together, you're going to get green. Okay, once we've done our 3 primaries, red, yellow, blue, and our 3 secondaries, now we're going to move to our paintbrush over here. We have to be careful. We don't want to move too fast because if certain colors get together and they blend, then it will mess up the colors that you have. You're going to pick a color. Which color is your favorite color? So you have all these colors to look at to figure out what you want to add to your paint palette right here. So I'm going to do purple. Now we're going to move to the colors that are in between. These are tertiary colors. These are when you take a secondary color and you add a more primary color to it to change the color. So we're going to have to do a little mixing on your palette of your own. So it's just going to be a paper plate, and make sure it's not paper where it soaks in the paint, but something that you'll be able to blend the paint. This is like a styrofoam one, so it's not going to mix, it's not going to suck in the paint. So you have to do a little mixing, and you kind of have to work fast because you don't want it to dry. So our first thing, let's start with yellow orange. So it is the blob between your yellow and your orange. So what I want to do is I'm going to get some orange on here and then add a little yellow to it. You can see it makes a new color, and then it should be a lighter shade of orange. Okay, now we're gonna move to the other side of that, yellow-green. So I'm gonna add a little green to my palette and lighten it up with yellow. And it should be a lighter shade of green. I think if it's too close, I'm gonna get a little more yellow. Now we're going to go around and do that for the rest. So the two colors that are big, you're going to mix the darker color on your palette, put that on your palette, and add the lighter color in. So right here, I'm going to take red and I'm going to add some orange into it. And we're going to keep moving around our palette, purple and red. And you should see a slight difference in the colors. Okay, as you can see, I have finished the primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. Again, the tertiary colors are taking your two blobs and mixing them together. But again, do it on a styrofoam plate where the paint is not going to dry and you can still use it. So we have finished all of ours and we finished that. This is going to dry for today, and then we'll move into adding the shade, like a lighter gray, to add that three-dimensional look. Cleaning up, make sure that you are closing, leave the paints open on the tray, that way they dry, because if you lift them up they'll drip. So leave the paints open. Please make sure that you're returning your brush to get cleaned, and your water cup, make sure that you're listening to directions what to do with your water cup. The paint mat and the artwork are going to the drying rack. That shade to make it three-dimensional. So you should have your artwork. Make sure you have it on a paint palette. You should have your paints ready, your brush, and your water on your tray. Again, we need another mixing tray. Again, I'm using styrofoam so it won't soak into the plate and we can still mix with these watercolors. Now, you are going to be using a gray, which you don't have a gray. You have a black. We're going to lighten it up with water. Water's going to make it lighter. What we're painting is this outer part here, and here, and then the gray part here. And then we'll add some detail to make our brush look three-dimensional. Now you have to think about a light source. Technically right now the way I have it drawn, the light source is coming from the left corner. So that is giving the light here, which means it's going to make the shadow here. So if the light's here, we'll make the shadow on the brush here. I know I didn't draw the lines, but I'll show you what to do. So what we're going to do is take a little black on our paint palette, lighten it up with water. Once you feel like you've got a light enough gray, we're just going to go right here where that little spot is. Now, the other thing we're going to do is to our paint blobs. We're also going to think the lights come in here, which means the shadows here. So on those little blobs, I'm just going to add a little gray on this side only. Okay, the next one we're going to do is our brush. Let me get a little more black. More water. Okay, so the gray part, because this is technically silver, we're going to paint that. Not the bristles. And then again, I'm going to come on this side of my brush, follow the line, just on that side of my brush. So again, your paint palette, this is trash. Make sure that it's thrown away. Make sure that your brush gets in the correct place. Make sure it's cleaned off. As you were putting your things up, remember, do not close the paints. Leave them open so they can dry. Make sure that you know what to do with the water cup. And the next step is making sure that your artwork and your paint mat get to the drying rack.